"The light is coming from that strange lake," Sparrow commented. "Lake?" Hild asked. Zaldivar had applied an ointment to Bowen's leg and was finishing wrapping it in a bandage. "You'll be able to walk, I think, but stay off it as much as possible," Zaldivar said. "Now drink this down." He handed Bowen a vial. "Well," Bowen said with false cheer. He drank the tincture and rose, gingerly testing his leg. "I suppose we should be off then, yes?" A dark shadow passed in front of the distant light, the silhouette of a man approaching, slowly coming into focus. The light behind it was following, spreading into the cavernous chamber, exposing cracks deep and wide in the walls, ceiling, and floor. They all took a few steps to stand closer together. It neared, and 2 points of flame sparked to life where the figure's eyes should be. The illumination of the room grew, and the figure came fully into focus. Before them stood an armored warrior, clad fully in a suit of black plate armor, adorned with spikes and crests. Blue flames flickered from the eye slits of the helmet. In one hand was a huge black kite shield. Gripped in the other was a sword of matching enormity. The armor, shield, and sword glistened like glass or crystal. The armored being took a few gliding steps toward them. It stood head and shoulders over the tallest of them. The kite-shaped shield it hefted could have covered Hamish like a blanket, and its black sword was as long as Hild was tall. "Declare yourself!" Hamish shouted. 3 more fluid steps. The movements were weightless, as if its limbs were pulled by invisible strings. Hamish was glacially cool. "Declare yourself, or lose your head, friend or foe." "Welcome, guests, to thy doom." It was shrill and breathy, and sent shivers down Vagelin's spine. With an eerie grace, the sword and shield went up, forming an ancient battle stance. By way of instinct and muscle memory, the warriors responded by assuming each of their own fighting postures. "Foe it is," breathed Hamish. He twirled his sword and spear in a grand flourish while taking bold advancing steps, matching Hamish's advance. The imposing being merely leaned forward. The uncanny movement began slowly. It was gliding across the floor toward them, gaining speed. Hamish broke into a run. They raced towards each other. Sparrow, Hild, and Brune were on Hamish's heel. Vagelin took Bowen's arm and draped it over her shoulder, lending him her stability. She readied her still glowing blade, and Bowen could not but stare at it. Zaldivar and Ventessa moved outward, taking up flanking positions to their left and right. The black-clad adversary reared its sword arm back and raised its shield, readying a mighty blow. Hamish rained 3 strikes against that immense wall of defense before the black sword came thundering across in a vicious arc. Hamish stepped back, avoiding the swing by a hand's width. Ventessa fired an arrow, narrowly missing. Brune leapt forward, hammer crashing into the thing's shoulder. The black armor absorbed the blow, and it swept its shield into Brune, who stumbled back with a bloody nose, and almost dropped his great hammer. Hamish stepped in again, and landed 2 slashes across its plate-armored thigh. His sword and spear each left trailing plumes of black dust where they struck. The enemy turned its armored head and hissed at him. Sparrow waited eagerly for an opening. He spoke over his shoulder. "Zaldivar, what is this accursed thing?" Zaldivar, short sword in one hand, throwing dagger in the other, answered, "Hard to say. Some form of umber-fell, half-giant, cursed knight." He hurled a dagger past Sparrow. It clanged into the enemy's breastplate and fell harmlessly to the floor. "Damn!" he cursed. "Fallen paladin, perhaps?" He moved deeper into the flank and readied another dagger. Hild parried the black blade and barely got her defense up in time to block a shield bash. Brune made a lunging uppercut from behind the thing. The hammer swept up, careening into the back of the glistening helmet. The helmet shattered into a bloom of dust and shards. The enemy reeled, pitching forward from Brune's blow. As the fragments cleared, they all saw what was underneath, a human skull enshrined in blue fire. "Lich!" Zaldivar shouted, and the horrid skull cackled. The lich glided backward, putting the same stone column to its back that Hamish had crashed into. The falling water splashed into the lich's rear leg. Its black armor appeared to corrode beneath the pure water, and the lich recoiled as if burned. Sparrow whirled his twin swords, catching the enemy in the back of its leg, where the water had weakened it. Cracks spread all over the black armor in a spiderweb pattern, and the towering enemy fell to one knee. Hamish slashed, striking the thing's bony cheek. Its head whipped back, and Hamish yelped in pain and dropped his sword. Blue flames flickered across the steel as it fell, covered in frost. Hild swung at its chest like a forester chopping down a tree. Her claymore passed through the whole of its mass. The black armor splintered into dusty fragments, exploded to ash, fell to piles on the stone floor. The skull fell onto the pile of ash, which was all that remained of the once imposing weapons and armor. The blue fire receded into the skull's eye sockets and dissipated. The light of the room diminished until only the dragonfly lamps and Vague's enchantment remained. Brune wiped blood from his face. It had dripped from his nose and stained his black beard red. "Blasted lich, hey?" he shouted, and hardly patted Hild's shoulder. She only stared at the remains. Vagelin sheathed her blade. Hamish blew alongside. "Zaldivar, a binding, perhaps." Zaldivar was rummaging through his cloak. "Just need to find something that will take to this stone. Aha!" He hurried up to the pile of ash and bone and sprinkled a pale yellow powder over the skull. Ventessa wrinkled her nose. "That smells worse than the rank dog's guts back there." Zaldivar mumbled his reply. "Sulphur, yellow birch bark, smidgen of dove's blood, and a few other agents." The blue light reappeared dimly in the depths of the skull's eye sockets. "I must make haste," Zaldivar whispered. With trembling hands, he took a thick piece of chalk to draw a circle around the pile of ash. The dim blue light flickered as he closed the chalk circle. He finished by drawing symbols around the outside of the circle. "I thought you said you were no magic user," Vagelin asked. She eased Bowen down to sit on the floor. "Magic is a species of thaumaturgy," Zaldivar said as he sat back on his knees. "And this is thaumaturgy, to be sure, but not magic." Brune strolled over and sat beside Bowen. Vagelin started to say, "I don't follow, though I admit I—" From where he knelt in front of the skull, Zaldivar snapped, "Hush now!" The blue flames suddenly returned, far weaker than they appeared previously. An unearthly croning emitted from the skull. The circle and its symbols glowed a faint purple hue. The skull's inhuman wailing transformed, becoming more the gentle moan of a man, though colored by spectral resonance. "What is this place?" echoed the mournful, disembodied voice from the skull. "You are under my power, and you will now answer to me," Zaldivar commanded. He straightened his back and placed his palms on his hips in a strange, formal-looking position. "Who were you?" "Were?" asked the voice. There was a sad confusion in its timbre. "I am... It's all so dark. Why is it so dark?" It made a sound of pain. "I am Lord Alos." Then the pitch rose higher again. "Alos is no more! I am Desagras, master of the Black Mountain realm." "Black Mountain?" Brune asked. "I've never heard of such a place." "It's very old," Ventessa said. "The tallest peak in the mountains that surround this valley was once called the Black Mountain." "Why are you here?" Zaldivar probed. The skull moaned, its voice wavering between the semi-human spectral and the higher-pitched, frightening tone. "Centuries! For centuries! 4 and more have I watched these lands. Felt the sting of the bitter black have I. Traversed the plains. Power sought and power found. Cursed by it. Watched the pawns crawl across the... centuries." Vague interjected. "Ask it about my father." Zaldivar nodded and went on. "Hear me. What has become of Lord Greybrook?" "Greybrook?" The voice was calmer for a moment. "The river folk. Peasants. How?" The voice changed again. The blue flames conjured brighter, and a peal of wicked laughter issued forth, in its bizarre higher-pitched voice. It spoke again in that eerie tone. "Ye of the Vale, ye dung folk, usurpers and low-bred fey cousins, seek thou the Greybrook cur? Not far, no, not far." The jaw clicked. Vagelin took a step closer. It went on. "Dost thou know how a basilisk comes to speak the mortal tongue?" It chortled low and sinister. "What does that mean?" Ventessa asked. Zaldivar looked up at her. He swallowed. "Oh, my lady, I—" The skull clicked its jaw, and its blue flames flickered brightly. "Thou shalt find thy father's head right in the belly of the beast." It erupted into horrible, screaming laughter. A chill rush of air swirled about the cavern, and the chalk ring and symbols lost all of their light. Zaldivar got up, stepped back, and watched as his chalk symbols began to fade. Such power! Vagelin walked up to the skull with a purposeful stride, and her fingers balled into fists. With her left foot she stepped right over the chalk circle. With her right she kicked the skull. When it reached the zenith of its trajectory, a protuberance of black, watery substance rushed forth from the shadows. The water arched up, caught the skull, engulfed it, and receded back into the black, oily lake. The rush of air dissipated, and all grew quiet. Ventessa gawked at her sister. "That was ill-advised," said Zaldivar. Vagelin was breathing hard, fingers clenched around the hilt of the sheathed sword. She stared into the darkness after the skull. "It had already broken your bindings." Hamish rubbed his temples with two gloved fingers. "We may need to renegotiate terms." Brune produced a piece of tough jerky from a belt sack, ripped it in half, and passed one of the halves to Bowen. "Damn your terms," Ventessa said, striding forward. "Where is that white worm?" Notwan watched in disbelief from where he hid in the shadows. It was a small comfort to him that he wasn't the only one to underestimate this band of apparently seasoned warriors. How weak that skull appeared now. Notwan, having observed the unfolding events from his hidden vantage, was regretting the pact he had made. Desagras, the old lich, spoke to him from within his mind. "Notwan, thou loathsome fool, come to me." Notwan felt the urgency exerted by Desagras's power over him, and though it pained him to resist, this he wouldn't do. He thought back. "Thy spell is broken. The jewel, my eye." Notwan knew he needed to escape this situation. If the warriors didn't slay him, the lich would consume him. He did not envy the mirelings he had watched disintegrate into the black pool. No, he would not give himself to that fate, not for any promise of power. He would survive. Limping, Notwan edged towards the single exit that would allow his girth. He moved as quietly as possible. As he neared, he saw that the humans still held the way. He began to curse his luck when Desagras sent waves of suffering into him. He pressed against the wall of the cave, racked with pain. The lich's voice returned. "Thou coveted the mortal form so. I gave thee naught but what Notwan desired. Now I command thee, return to me." Notwan had not heard such urgency from the ancient being ever. "Come now, and all shall be forgiven. Betray me, and endure agony unfathomable." But Notwan knew better. Notwan had learned. And Notwan realized that these enemies, these humans, might just be the ones to free him from torment, for he just so happened to hold the key to their success. Of course, if he could slip past them, no further deals would be required. If they could simply occupy Desagras long enough, Notwan could make good his escape. Exhaustion was seeping into Hamish's body. He took a long draw of water from his canteen and wiped his lips. He looked over the party in the dim light. Zaldivar and Vagelin were bickering, as were Hild and Ventessa. Brune and Bowen sat and ate something. He wanted to join the brothers, but the thought of food made his stomach churn. The group needed direction. His mind reeled a bit, clouded with indecision and fatigue. By his estimation, they were all just about spent. Not for the first time in his career was he in such a hesitant spot, but he also knew that to delay in such circumstances could mean death, and every moment they wasted, he was sure, was time their enemies spent recovering power. He heard his voice before he really knew what he was going to say. "All right, listen, all of you." The arguments and eating stopped, and they all looked at him. He cleared his throat. Ventessa looked his way. Her eyes bulged, and with lightning speed she pulled an arrow, drew Elkhart to full, and fired. The arrow split the air, and the fletchling grazed Hamish's neck and drew a thin line of blood. Hamish put his hand over the scratch. "What the Behind you, fool!" Ventessa shouted and drew another arrow. Hamish turned just as the basilisk cried out in thunderous pain. It was clawing at the arrow protruding from its cheek. Another arrow landed beside the first, and the monster rolled and writhed. Brune helped Bowen to his feet. Weapons ready, they all closed in on the horrid white thing. Then it spoke. "Mercy!" it cried. "Oh, mercy, I beg!" Its booming voice was both terrible and pitiful. Another arrow flew. This one plunged up to the fletchings in the beast's gut. It moaned horribly, then spoke again. "Notwan will tell thee of the master's secret." Ventessa was readying another arrow when Vagelin put a hand up in front of her. "What is this secret?" Vagelin asked. "And do not deceive me." Notwan groaned. "The undoing of Desagras is simple, but without it none shall leave this place. I'll not deceive, but have me my life I will." A rumbling issued from the dark lake behind them. "Speak now, creature," Sparrow commanded. "We can't trust it," Hamish warned. Trust my self-preservation, human, Not One spat. Very well, said Vagelin. She glanced at Hamish, who sighed, but said nothing. No, Ventessa pushed past her sister. Vagelin stretched out her arm to stop her. Ventessa turned, her own arm raised as if to strike. Vagelin's voice was calm. Father is dead. She paused and looked hard into her sister's eyes. It is the land we must protect now, our people. We must root out the source of this evil. Ventessa slowly moved back to her sister's side. Vagelin spoke again to the creature. If we spare you, will you leave this valley and never return? Not One replied. A promise Not One shall gladly keep. This is a mistake, Hamish whispered. Bruin washed his bloodied face in the water that streamed down from the column. Vagelin gripped her sword. Then tell us your secret, Nefasto. Not One pulled the arrows free from his cheek and dropped them to clatter on the ground. He peered at the adventurers from his one eye. Ye mortals have forgotten so much. Slowly, it drew the arrow from its stomach and let it fall beside the others. The skull is a corrupt being. It draws power from the corruption of that which purifies. No riddles, said Hamish as he leveled his spear. Zaldivar spoke up. Water, Hamish. Not much of a riddle, really. Not One struggled to its feet. Yes, he sighed. Clean running water. It must be enough to inundate. Otherwise... Bruin shook the droplets from his face and beard. He called, Something's moving back there. If that's its weakness, asked Vagelin, why reside here? She gestured toward the dripping cavern walls and columns. The room began to fill with faint blue light, and frigid air swirled about the space. Not One lurched toward the exit, turned, and spoke. Such curious little things ye are. When taken in measure, he is able to transform it, corrupt it. Once ruined, it becomes his power, but in concentration, it may spell his doom. It may, Hamish asked. Not One the basilisk, wounded and bleeding, slinked through the broken wall and vanished into the darkness beyond. And for a long time, they did not see him again. Bruin came back from the stalagmites, hammer in hand. He pulled Hild by the shoulder so she would look behind them. Hild raised her greatsword. What new evil is this? One by one they each turned and stared. A great mass of black, viscous material was filling the far end of the chamber. Tongues of blue flame licked over it. Bruin, Hamish called. Set to work on that column. Bruin, not understanding, looked back at Hamish. Bring it down, Hamish ordered, and he noticed his breath had drawn steam from the air. Bruin bobbed his head vigorously, drops of icy water falling from his beard. He jogged up to the stone and set to chopping at it like a woodsman felling a tree. Over and over again, the hammer rung against the stone, sparking through rivulets of water. Sparrow took Hamish by the arm. You'll bring the roof right down on our heads. Hamish pulled his arm free. Make a line. The black substance was growing, bubbling and rippling toward them. It's not budging, Ham, Bruin shouted, and Bowen limped over to stand beside him. Live by the axe, eh? Reflected Bowen. He went to the other side of the rock pillar, stood in full flow of the water, and began to slam the stone with his axe as best he could, despite his aching leg. The surface of the black mass began to form spikes that swirled and reached out towards them. Don't let it touch you, cried Zaldivar as he leapt back, nursing his hand. It burns like fire, but cold, and sticks like oil. Oil, said Hamish. He looked back at the brothers. They were drenched, hammering away at the stalagmite to no noticeable effect. Lady Vague, do you think you can repeat that spell of fire? I don't know, she hesitated and took another step back. But we need water, Ham, not fire. Hamish moved to the broken wall. Just get it ready. He jogged over to where they dropped their gear, but before he reached the bags, he saw the tendrils of the black substance had been quietly encircling them and was nearing the exit. He rummaged through the items and realized his hands were terribly cold. Flinging items this way and that, he found what he was looking for. The last oil lamp. Grabbing it up, he hurried over to Bruin and Bowen. The brothers were heaving mighty blows upon the stone. Between each thunderous swing, they took gasping breaths. As Hamish came up, they stopped hacking. Won't budge, said Bowen in a long exhale. Vagelin came up to them with her spell in hand. She was hugging herself and shivering. She saw the black mass creeping around the edges of the cave. Look, it's going to cut us off from the way out. Hamish was clambering up the wet pillar. Give me a lift, Bruin. Bruin grumbled but wove his fingers together for Hamish to step into. The water raining upon his head was warmer than the air around them. Reaching one arm out of the deluge to keep the oil lamp from being filled with the water, Hamish stretched upward and found a small space in the ceiling. After 2 tries, he managed to get the lamp into the nook, just beside where the water was pouring out. He hopped down and pulled Brune and Bowen by their arms. "Everyone back! Back towards the hole!" They all moved as one. The open space was rapidly yielding to the mass of black, corrupted water. At the broken wall, it was rising to seal off the exit. It reached the leaking column where Hamish had placed the oil lamp, and the skull appeared from out of its depths, covered in blue flame and screeching. "Now!" shouted Hamish. Vagelin cast. She finished the spell just as the blackness swallowed the pillar. There was a concussive blast, and a massive tremor shook through the caverns. The black viscous material was splashing down in massive, oily geysers. A torrent of water sprang from the ceiling and began to wash back the blackness. Behind them, the way opened clear, and suddenly water was up to their knees. "Move!" cried Ventessa, and they all scrambled for the exit, splashing through the deepening water. Zaldivar scooped up the dragonfly lamps as he passed, and Brune lifted most of Bowen, who was limping badly. As she followed the others out, Vagelin looked back into the chamber. Floating in a mix of black and clear water was the skull, its blue flames sputtering. A wave rolled over it, engulfed it, and then it was only a blue-green glow, vanishing beneath the turbulent waves. As she followed the others out, Vagelin looked back into the chamber. Floating in a mix of black and clear water was the skull, its blue flames sputtering. A wave rolled over it, engulfed it, and then it was only a blue-green glow, vanishing beneath the turbulent waves. The water rose as they sped through the subterranean halls. In places it swelled up to their chests, ushering them to make even greater haste in their retreat. After several hours of uphill travel in the near dark, they emerged, sodden and pale with exhaustion. It was night and cool. The moon, nearly full, was high in the cloud-speckled sky, and the smell of snow was in the air. Hamish fell to his knees, taking gulps of air. Sparrow and Zaldivar sat and did the same. Brune unceremoniously dumped Bowen to the ground, only to collapse beside him. Vagelin put her hands on her knees and leaned her back against a tree, while Ventessa and Hild looked like they could actually go on forever. Bowen spoke into the cold ground he was lying on, his voice muffled. "Hamish?" Hamish rolled his head across his shoulders. "What?" Bowen replied. "That's it. I retire." Brune coughed out a laugh and rubbed his side. "Rubbish!"